a nonprofit dedicated to building the next generation of South Asian leadership within our community. The WLP, along with AAHOA, the Asian American Hotel Owners Association, are hosting this webinar in hopes of seeing more diverse faces at both the Republican and Democratic national conventions. So I want to thank you all for your interest today in learning about the process to become a delegate for the Republican National Convention. We're fortunate today to have three outstanding leaders in our community to talk about the importance of getting involved in the process and how to do so. Our special guests include our very own WLP alum and state representative from Ohio, Niraj Antani, Jason Chung, the National OPI Field and Communications Director for the RNC, and finally Neil Patel, the Communications Director for Senator Heller of Nevada. So I will kick it off with you, Niraj. If you could tell us a little bit about how you got involved with politics and why you got involved, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, thanks, and thanks for having me here today. Like Joyce said, I'm Niraj Antani, state representative from Ohio. Currently honored to serve as the second Indian American state elected official in Ohio history, as well as the first Indian American Republican. I got involved in politics at a very early age. Actually, when I was 16, interning for my congressman in D.C. I'd always been politically interested. Those were the subjects I was good at in school, and decided, to further my involvement through this internship, and that led me to, work on the Romney campaign in 2008, and then also in college to do the Washington Leadership Program, which placed me in an internship on Capitol Hill in D.C. in 2010. Since then, obviously, I graduated from Ohio State, went to law school, and then, last year ran for the House of Representatives in Ohio and won that election. It really is extremely important for Indian Americans to be involved politically. Indian Americans are very successful in a lot of different industries, but politics is one where we're not necessarily developed or hold very high positions. But I deal a lot with issues that face the Indian American community, whether it's physician issues, issues dealing with hotel owners or the tech industry, and so it's an honor for me to be able to represent our community in the State House in Ohio.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Neil Patel. If you could tell us a little bit about your background, how you got involved in politics, and why you got involved.
Sure. My name's Neil Patel, and I work on Capitol Hill right now for Senator Dean Heller of Nevada. I was born and raised in South Carolina in a small town called Nichols. It's got about 400 people, and in that small town, my parents, like many other immigrants, were business owners, first-generation hotel owners, and they basically were the first and only hotel in town, and I grew up in that small business background. So I was exposed to local government at a young age. As you know, when you're from a very small town, you are faced with a lot of issues as a business owner, and sometimes the sheriff is the same person that is related to the mayor, is the same person that is related to the superintendent of the school board. And because of that, I was able to get involved very early. My mother ended up teaching school as well, high school. So we were in the community from a very young age. I was able to see how things work behind the scenes. And then I went to college in Chapel Hill and then law school down in Charleston. And I practiced law for 2 years in the Carolinas. And I had an itch to come up to Washington, D.C. And in 2010, I started working for my congressman, a local congressman from South Carolina by the name of Joe Wilson, who is a big friend of the Indian American community. He served as a chairman of the Indian Caucus. And actually, he, if you look back in the paperwork in 1978, the registered agent for the first Hindu temple in South Carolina, it was Joe Wilson, who was the registered attorney to make sure that the land was given free and clear title. So Congressman Wilson was a good fit. Initially, I got my first start there. I became his communications director, and I was enamored with politics from a young age. Niraj is actually the front face that everybody sees. I work on the back end of things. I'm a staffer, so I would need to see more people like Niraj on the front end that are elected officials And on the flip side, we need to see more people like us that are Indian Americans on the back end as staffers. The Washington Post had a story earlier this week that said of Senate staffers, of the senior staff, only 7% are minorities. However, I will say that many of the Indian Americans that are on Capitol Hill are in senior staff positions, specifically on the Republican side. I know Senator Mitch McConnell's top energy staffer is Indian, is Indian American, and then Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming, his executive director of the Republican Policy Committee on the Senate side, Indian American. So we have a very small group, but we are, like in many things, we are focused on climbing to the top as fast as we can because we don't want to do it any other like everybody else. We wanted to do it much faster and much more efficiently. And again, also, I will say that everybody is always reminded that politics is local. And Neeraj is a great example of starting at the local level. A lot of people see Governor Nikki Haley in South Carolina. She's great as a governor. But if you look at her past, she started out at the State House in South Carolina, and she was a local representative, and she climbed her way to the top. And it's something that I think is overlooked time and time again. Slow and steady does win the race in politics. And there may be some exceptions to the rule, but if we can get involved on the local level, whatever the situation is, just get involved. There's a lot of apathy, or there's a lot of I want to go straight to the top. And unfortunately, in politics, that's not the way it works. So if I can stress anything out of this, get involved. The RNC wants Indian Americans to get involved. And on my end, especially with staffers, we are always trying to connect with other Indian Americans that are interested in politics because we want to see our faces everywhere. We're in tech, we're in medical field, we're in business ownerships. Politics is something that's a little bit elusive, but the few that we have, they're doing very well. We just need more numbers.
Great, thank you. So Neil and Neeraj, I actually want to ask you an additional question. And Neil, maybe we can start with you. What advice would you give to young professionals just starting out in their career who are interested in getting involved in politics? Particularly if they're interested in coming to Washington, D.C. And then Neeraj, I'd be interested to hear kind of more of your perspective on how to get involved in politics in your local community.
Sure. Well, there's really two avenues to get involved. It's either on the political side with campaigns or on the policy side, interning for your U.S. senator, congressman, or at the state house level. If anyone wants to get involved, it's very easy to call up, a state representative or a state senator or even a congressman and say, I'm interested in politics and learning about politics and working on your campaign. And that's how I started. I started, getting the mail for Congressman Turner and going through the mail and answering phones. And to this day, I still do, tasks like that. That's how you get ahead in politics, is through the hard work and the nitty-gritty. But, I was privileged enough to have a variety of experiences, all the way from interning for a state senator in the state house to Capitol Hill in D.C. to working on a presidential campaign in 2012. And so really, politics is about, it's a people business. And every politician, every elected official is looking for help, and they know that young people are willing to work hard. And so it's very easy to call up your local elected officials and say you want to help them out.
Awesome, thanks.
And I would echo exactly what he just said. I started working on Capitol Hill as a 27-year-old intern after practicing law for 2 years. It was an unpaid internship. I walked into Congressman Wilson's office and I said, I'll do whatever it is that you need me to do. And that was answer phones, that was stuff envelopes, that was give tours, that was unpaid for 5 months living in Washington, D.C. A lot of times people say, well, how'd you get where you got? I can only explain that you have to be able to check your ego at the door and start from the bottom and work your way up. And it will happen, but you just have to have faith. And I promise you, there's nothing more that tests your resolve more than living in one of the country's most expensive cities without a paycheck and constantly going to work and feeling that you're doing menial tasks. But guess what? Everybody has to pay their dues. And on the staffer side, that's exactly right. Because on Capitol Hill, everyone is very well educated. Everyone has the drive and determination. It's just on you to figure out how to navigate it. And Indian Americans are pretty resourceful people. I'll have to say that we have a very tight-knit community, and even across the country where people stick together. And on Capitol Hill, you're in the business of relationships, and there's no other place that really, really exemplifies that than Capitol Hill, but even on the state level and the local level. When it comes to politics, it's, again, the business of relationships, and you have to remember that and just kind of be willing to do whatever it is to get your foot in the door and work your way up.
Great, thank you. Now, Jason, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about the Republican National Convention, the process for becoming a delegate, and maybe just kick it off by telling us a little bit about your background as well.
Thanks for having me. Basically, my background is I got started in politics right out of college. I worked for a state senate candidate in Connecticut. Then I was lucky enough to get an internship like Neil, worked for free for a congressman for a few months, and he hired me, and then moved down to Washington, spent about 6 years on Capitol Hill, went to the private sector, went to work for the governor of Maryland, then back into federal government, working for the Department of Homeland Security, and then back to the private sector. And about 3 years ago, I started work at the RNC, getting back to things more political. That's my story in a nutshell. But since we're here to talk about convention and getting involved in politics, if the listeners and watchers of this webinar want to get involved, we have something called the Republican Leadership Initiative, which is a 6-week program designed for interested individuals who want to get paying job in the upcoming presidential election. So we're very proud of that program, and we're always looking for individuals of all ethnicities who want to participate in our political process and work for our eventual nominee to come and participate in that way, and be happy to share that link with all of you at the appropriate time if you're interested. Secondly, as you alluded to, we're going to be hosting the Republican National Convention in Neeraj's home state of Ohio, Cleveland specifically. Dates of the convention are pretty much in the third week of July, I think like the 18th through like the 22nd, thereabouts. It's going to be a wonderful experience, and we want as many people from our diverse country to come and attend. To your question specifically, each state, each county, each locality has different rules by which they govern the delegate selection process, but the first thing that individuals really need to do is register to vote. When you register to vote, you will be sought after by both the Democrats and the Republicans to get your vote. Secondly, if you're a Republican, I want you to attend your local county Republican meeting, which I know Neeraj has done plenty of times. I know Neil has done, and it's a great way to get your start and get a great way to get involved in being part of that infrastructure. I think both have alluded to being part of the infrastructure and making sure that you're a part of that process, because when you're a part of that process, your voice is heard. Neil gives great advice to Senator Heller, and I'm sure Neeraj gets a ton of advice from a lot of constituents, a lot of people who wish him well on how to do the best possible job he can possibly do in Columbus. So that get involved in your county party, and then you will be selected to be a delegate to your county convention, where they will select a few people. Usually, they take as many people as they want to be delegates to the state party convention. And at the state party convention or state assembly, depending on the state you're from, you can run as a delegate to the national convention, or you can run as an alternate delegate to the national convention. So there are different avenues where you can participate. If that doesn't happen, I know what most state parties do, county parties do, they take those who participated and those who want to go to the national convention as a guest, as an attendee. We're all for making that happen. I plan on having a lot of credentials that I can give out, and I know Neeraj is going to be there. I think Neil is going to be there, and we welcome all types of participation. And I have a little bit of cheat sheet back in the office that I can share with your viewers on specific state policies that govern the convention and delegate selection process.
Great. Yeah, when we distribute this, we'll definitely be sure to include that and also the link to the Republican Leadership Initiative. That would be great. Niraj, Neil, is there anything that you'd like to add as well about your experiences participating in the Republican National Convention and the process?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's going to be an exciting convention in Ohio, the swing state of all swing states, and look, as the elections go on, Indian Americans are growing their influence in the process. I firmly believe that the Indian American culture that leads us to be very conservative. Like Neil was saying, it takes a lot of hard work and personal responsibility to get to the top, which is what Indian Americans have done. And so really, I think the Republican Party represents us, and I hope we have a strong showing at the convention.
And I would add, get involved in your community any which way you can. We seem to be involved in so many different ways in our communities to accept the political side. And the Republican political side is the best side for our community. I'm a very devout believer in that. I grew up in South Carolina, so I might be a little bit biased, but I saw firsthand. My parents, shout out to AAHOA, because my parents were AAHOA members growing up, so I'm very, very well versed in what it does. But I feel like for an Indian American, especially to get involved with politics, the Republican Party offers so many more opportunities and chances. Again, Neeraj is a great example. He's a young guy. Governor Haley, another great example. That can be a lot of other people across the country, but you have to get involved early. You can't just say one day I'm going to run for federal office overnight. That's not how it works, and it may work for a few people, but for by and large, you just have to get involved. I don't care if you're running for dog catcher. Just run and get that experience under your belt, and that way we can start paying it forward down the line. And it may not happen overnight, but it will take some time, but that's okay. That's what we're known for, and we are a very efficient group, and success is something that we just have to be committed to, and we've done it in every other aspect. I don't understand why politics, specifically Republican politics, would be any different.
Joyce, I think one thing that I would like to add to that is, we want anybody who wants to come to Ohio, anybody who wants to participate in our political process, to be able to do that. And one thing that I talk to Niraj about all the time is how do we get more people involved. I talk to Neil about this quite a bit as well. And anybody who wants to contact me in Washington, who wants to get involved locally in their county or state, or even in federal politics, or even attend the convention, feel free to contact me. Yeah, WLP has my contact information. So, like they say, we're open for business. We want everybody to participate. We want to have a great showing of Indian Americans, like all other ethnicities, to come to Ohio, to come to Cleveland, and be a part of our political process. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be very interesting. These things only happen every 4 years, and it's going to be one of those things where it is so important for all Americans to get involved, because this election, like all others, are very important to our communities and to our livelihood and to our futures.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate you participating today and your time and your insights. And of course, we'd like to thank everybody for listening and for your interest in getting more involved in the political process. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to get in contact with us, you can connect with us via Facebook or at thewlp.com.